This lesson is on the Pythagorean Theorem. The Pythagorean Theorem is an equation or formula that's used to find the length of one side of a right triangle given the measure of the other two sides of a right triangle. Pythagorean Theorem says that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs of the right triangle, the two sides that form the right angle, and c is the side that's opposite the right angle or the hypotenuse. Again, in all right triangles, you have two legs. The legs are the sides that form the right angle, and the hypotenuse is always going to be the side that is opposite the right angle. And note that the hypotenuse is always the longest side of all right triangles. Alright, so if we want to find the length of this leg, we square both legs, add those two legs together, the square of both legs together, set it equal to the hypotenuse squared. So 3 squared plus x squared equals 5 squared. So we get 9 plus x squared equals 25. Subtract 9 from both sides. We get x squared equals 16. And then the opposite of squaring is square rooting. Now, naturally we would get, there's two values of x that we would get. We'd have plus and minus the square root of 16. However, since in geometry we're dealing with tangible things, we're dealing with lengths. These are referring to lengths of the sides, and you cannot have a negative length of the side. We just exclude the negative values. So just the square root of 16, which is going to be 4. So that leg, the missing leg, is going to be 4. For this right triangle, we would set it up as either 7 squared plus 3 squared equals x squared, or you can write it as 3 squared plus 7 squared equals x squared, but x is the hypotenuse, so it should be by itself on one side of the equation. That gives us 49 plus 9 equals x squared. 58 equals x squared. Take the square root of both sides, and x is going to equal the square root of 58. And that would be the exact measure for the hypotenuse. If you were told to approximate the measure of the hypotenuse, then you would just plug that into your calculator and you get approximately 7.62. Alright, in this example we've got a ladder that's placed 3 feet from a wall. The ladder is 12 feet long. How far above the ground does the ladder touch the wall? So it may be helpful to draw a picture. Alright, so the ladder is the hypotenuse of that right triangle. The wall is x, that's what we're looking for. And the wall is 3 feet from the ground, so that's that bottom leg. Use the Pythagorean Theorem. X squared plus 3 squared equals the hypotenuse squared. 3 squared is 9, 12 squared is 144. Subtract 9 from both sides. We get x squared equals 135. Take the square root of both sides. And the exact measure for that wall would be the square root of 135. We were told to approximate it. We would plug that into our calculator and get approximately 11.6 feet. Alright, in this example we're given that a square has an area of 81 square centimeters. We need to find the length of each side and the diagonal. So a square is a quadrilateral with 4 equal sides. So since the length times width gives us the area, and the length and the width are the same, then the area of all squares is just going to be the length of one side times itself, or that side squared. Since 81 equals s squared, and then we take the square root of both sides, we get s equals 9. So each side of this right triangle is going to be 9. If we draw the diagonal right through the middle, we'll get a right triangle that has both legs, a measure of 9. So we're trying to find the measure of the hypotenuse. So we would use the Pythagorean Theorem. 9 squared plus 9 squared equals x squared. 81 plus 81 is 162. Take the square root of both sides, and x equals the square root of 162. That would be the exact measure. The approximate measure would be 12.7 centimeters. Now we have a triangle that has sides 12, 14, and 25. We want to determine whether this triangle is a right triangle. Now again, the longest side, if this is a right triangle, the longest side will be the hypotenuse, so our C will be 25 if this is a right triangle. So we're going to plug in 12 for A or B, plug in 14 for A or B, and then plug in 25 for C. So we get 12 squared plus 14 squared equals 25 squared. 144 plus 196 equals 625. When we add up the two values on the left side, we get 340, which does not equal 625. So that tells us that this is not a right triangle. All right, now we want to determine, is this a right triangle? So again, we need to find out first what the approximate value of the square root of 170 is, what's the approximate value of the square root of 86, because we need to find out which one of those sides has the longest measure. All right, so the square root of 170 is approximately 13. The square root of 86 is approximately 9. So the longest side, the longest side is the 16 meters. So 16 would be our hypotenuse if this is a right triangle. So again, use the Pythagorean theorem. One of the legs squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. And since the square root and squaring are opposite processes, they cancel each other. So the square root of 170 squared is just 170, just like the square root of 86 squared is just 86. Square root 16 squared is 256. 170 plus 86 is 256. Since the left side equals the right side, this is a right triangle.